Confessions. I'm Paul McGowan, and today I thought it might be interesting to talk about tweaks. Tweaks and good practices, because both have an impact on our stereo system. One, good practices you should follow. Tweaks, they can be helpful. I've heard many a good tweak that really improves stuff, but you got to be careful with them. I thought perhaps we'd start by just explaining what a tweak is. Good practices we'll talk about in a second. A tweak can be, any number of things, from wooden blocks to magic potions and sprays. There are just green pens around CDs. There are literally hundreds of tweaky things that one can do, and all of them seem to have some type of effect, often good. But used in aggregate, they can confuse systems and certainly customers. And you can spend a lot of money and get sort of an instant gratification that later on wears off. So we might want to have a little bit of pause when it comes to tweaks and thinking about how we implement them and why. And I want to start out with a story that I write about in the book, Confessions of an Audiophile. And this takes us back to Taiwan. I've made many trips to Taiwan. It's one of my favorite countries. It's a lovely country. And our distributor, Mr. Pooh, good friend of mine, took me on a very long trip to a place called Tainan. And in Tainan, which is at the far end from Taipei in Taiwan, there was a gentleman who had a gorgeous system. He had a pair of our big Gen 1s, which are kind of like the IRS 5 that I have in Music Room 1. Big, giant 4-column speaker system, servo-amplified bass, ribbon tweeters top to bottom, 7.5 feet tall, wonderful system. And he was struggling with this system. And Mr. Pooh had done his best to try and tell him, look, you got too much stuff going on. There's every manner of tweak and room correction stuff that he had just piled into this listening room, and he wouldn't listen to Mr. Pooh. He had to hear it from me or from Arnie or somebody like that. So he was waiting very patiently in his place, and we get to Tainan, have tea with the gentleman, a very nice man, and he takes us up to his listening room, which happened to have been an entire floor of a building. Here was this huge apartment complex. I think he lived on one of the floors above, but we went down an elevator and up an elevator, and got to his listening room, which occupied this entire floor, huge. And in the middle of this thing, pushed up near one end, was the big Gen 1s, huge setup, gorgeous, beautiful rugs everywhere. And surrounding the Gen 1s and the listening position and everywhere else around there was the greatest collection of tube traps and room tunes and everything imaginable that audiophiles have. This guy had it, and he had it spread out all over the room. I'd never seen such a forest of tweaks and stuff in my life. And so we sat down and we listened, and the system was impressive. Gen 1s, Infinity IRSs, they're always impressive. Not always right, but certainly impressive. And this impressive system, though, had a few problems. It didn't image properly. The music came from the speakers rather than from behind the speakers. It wasn't properly detached. It was just probably a jumble is the best way I could describe this system. A jumble of sound. And so, in these processes, what you have to do is just be patient. Listen, play a lot of stuff, hear the reasoning behind why people do what they do, and treat it with gentle kindness, because folks put their lives into this. This is a big deal. A lot of money, but more than that, a lot of emotion. And so I spent a couple of hours playing my tracks and his tracks and trying to explain this and that. At the end of the time, what I did is I said, do you mind if I just do it? And he goes, no, that's why you're here. Please just do what you need to do. So what I did was I had, between Mr. Pooh and I, we pulled all the tube traps, all the room tunes, all this stuff, left a lot of the magic dots and the wooden blocks in place. But we took all the room conditioning products out, put them off to the side, and we started again. We started to set up the speakers, dial them in, get the voices right, get the sound coming from behind, and got it properly done in its basic form, without all this other tweaky stuff. And then slowly but surely we started adding back in until it detracted from the sound, and then pulled them back. And we were judicious with our use of the tube traps and the room tunes, and we let him have all his other little tweaks. And what he had done, and in the end, it turned out great. His system was wonderful. He thanked me, Mr. Pooh thanked me, and we went about our business. The lesson I took away from this was that here was a guy that was very much like a number of people I've met. Every time a new tweak comes out, every time something new is on the horizon for a system, they buy it. They buy it, they plug it in, it works, it doesn't work, and there's people coming up the trail here. I'm going to move off the trail for a sec. They buy it, and they put it in, and it sounds better, and they leave it. Then the next tweak comes out, and they do the same thing. Now, this is very different than good practices. Good practices we'll talk about in a second. So I think the basic message I have about room conditioning and tweaks and things are to do it very judiciously. Take your time with it. Make sure that you have a good basic setup first. Hi. Coming up the trail. Hi. And I think that's good advice for anybody. But best practices are different. There are ways that you can work with your stereo system, and now they're coming up the trail here, so let me say hi to them. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Who's making all that noise?
Oh, me.
No. Oh, you did that call?
Oh, no, I didn't do a call. Was there a call?
I thought that was a really loud bird back there.
No, I'm not that good.
Okay.
Oh, goodness. Good practices are, let me see if I can list a few of them. Keeping your cables suspended off the floor, not getting audio cables near power cables, vibration control, basic stuff, to where if you have a turntable, for example, you want to make sure that turntable is well isolated and grounded onto the table. That's very important because vibrations, especially on a turntable, but even on a CD player or even on a DAC, those are very important things to pay attention to. And so those kinds of good practices, of which in a future episode we'll talk more about, and I'll give you lists of what we can do for good practices. But I wanted to make the distinction between tweaks, which is the addition of any number of elixirs and sprays, these wooden blocks and things, and I'm not dissing those. I have tried many of those things at shows and in my own system, and they do work. Many of them do work. Some of them are, but many of them do work. So I'm not trying to diss them. I'm just suggesting that we be very judicious with them. In my experience and in my listening room, what I've found is that over time, even though I was originally enamored with this or that tweak, I wound up eliminating all of them. There are literally, other than the kinds of acoustic suspension things, there are literally no tweaks left in my room other than like a Land Rover, a couple of USB devices that help USB in very specific ways, but all of the blocks and the the sprays and stuff, all gone, all of them. Because over time, I've learned that what they address are some specific problems. And if you take care of those specific problems, like vibration, placement, and things that tweaks purportedly fix, if you take care of them in the first place, you're much better off than adding a tweak. We'll talk more about good practices and tweaks in a future episode. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.